So I'm James Powell. I run the workshop series here, the Success Workshops here at Hill Hall. So I'm really glad you're here. We have other workshops at wssu.edu/successworkshops. So that's where you need to go to access those. But I'm glad you're here today. I also teach 2 FYE 1250 classes. I don't see any. Are any of my students here? Is anybody here? I don't see anybody. So I also teach that class as well, which is great fun. Today we're going to talk about note-taking. All right. Let's first start by asking you all why you're here today. What is it about your note-taking you feel like maybe you need some help with? What are you unhappy about or unsatisfied with when it comes to note-taking? Anybody want to answer that?
It's not really effective in me retaining information. It's more so just jotting it down in the moment.
Right. It's not effective for retaining information, you're saying? Mm-hmm. You're just jotting it down in the moment. You don't know really what to do with it. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Great. Okay, what else? I see a nodding head. How do you feel? Other people feel that way? Okay. Anything else? I get a lot of head nods. What else are you feeling? How else are you feeling about your note-taking? What do you want to have help with? That about sums it up? Okay, that's great. Well, you're in the right place. Here's my presentation so you can watch along with me, but I'm also going to interact with you. There'll be a couple of times for reflection. I would strongly advise you, guess what? Take notes, okay? So if you have a sheet of paper or a laptop, you can take notes on there. This is going to be very helpful, and this is going to help you for the rest of your career. So if you really focus in, this can be very impactful. The first thing I'm going to talk about is SMORE for note-taking. SMORE is an acronym. Who can tell me what an acronym is? Yes, it is a short abbreviation of something longer. So just like LOL is laugh out loud, SMOR stands for something. It stands for, number 1, S for summarize. S for summarize. You want to be summarizing the things that you read so that, and what your professor is saying, so that you end up with a smaller amount to review. You don't have a huge amount of 300 pages at the end of a semester. Instead, you have a condensed version to review. The second piece is called mnemonics. Mnemonics is anything that helps you to remember. If mnemonics, because it starts with M, is a little strange, you can go with M for memory device. Okay? M for memory device. The third one is O for outline. Outlining is, again, very, very critical so that you don't have so much material you're just bogged down by all the details. Outlining is going to help you know what's coming, what came before, what comes after. Make sense so far? The fourth thing is R, review regularly. That means you want to go over your material on a frequent basis, even if it's a short burst of time. Quantity of time is less important than number of times you do it. In other words, what's better? Every night for 5 minutes, review your biology? Or let me try to do 30 minutes this week or this month. What's better? The first one. It's actually every night. It's not the 30 minutes. It's okay if you got that wrong, though, okay? It's okay. I mean, we're just here to learn together, right? So, safe space. So yes, you want to do it daily. So the repetition is going to help you. So S, summarize. How do we do that? Well, let's pretend we're doing textbook stuff. For every paragraph you read, and again, this is a general guideline. You don't have to do it strictly by the books. But generally speaking, for every paragraph you read that's important, you want to summarize that in 5 to 10 words. Briefly. Make sense? What that requires is that you actually understood what you read. How many of us have read a paragraph and you so sleepy, you like, okay, I got to read that again. And then you so sleepy, you got to read it again. And by the 4th time, you're like, I just give up. Anybody done that before? Right? I've been there, done that. Right? Because you're not doing it at the right times. To back up a minute, you got to make sure you're doing it at the right times. You have to understand your peak performance. Right? Just like an athlete. You have to figure out, am I best at 9 o'clock in the morning? Or am I best at 11 p.m.? Am I best right after dinner? Like, where am I most active, energetic, ready to focus? That's what I'm talking about. Okay? Know your peak moments when you're ready during the day. If you don't know that, you can't even start to do this stuff, right? Know when it's best to study, because studying requires active reading. If you're not in a place to actively read, you may as well not be reading. You get my drift? Because it's wasted time. You're just rereading that paragraph over and over like a broken record. That's not going to help. Everybody get me? So that's why summarizing has to be done in a time and place where you're ready to learn. Okay? If you're not at your best, move on to a different time when you're at your best. Has anybody not yet signed this? You all need to sign it? Okay. Would you mind please passing it back to him? Thank you. The next one is mnemonics. Let's go a little bit deeper. What is mnemonics? It's any memory device which allows you to remember key facts and details. Now this is to your point, and this is all the head nods. This is what we're getting to the juice, right? This is the good stuff. This is what we're talking about. Come up with a memory device. Have you noticed I've already used a memory device? What have I used? Up here. I've used SMOR, S-M-O-R. An acronym is, by definition, a memory device. It helps you to remember. What else do I have? What do I have up on that picture up there? On that PowerPoint? I gave it away. There's a picture up there. So another memory device is a visual image. So if you're trying to remember, I don't know, the acronym RAVE, R-A-V-E, maybe that's what you're trying to remember. Okay? RAVE for me stands for repeat, associate, visualize, exaggerate. Now you don't know what that means, but RAVE to me means something. But for me to remember the acronym RAVE, I might have the image of people going to a rave party. So the image and the word rave go together. When I think about it together. And that's how I can remember rave. And then I just have to remember the parts. Repeat, associate, visualize, exaggerate. Those take a little bit more work. And again, like I said, review regularly and you'll get the RAVE. Does that make sense? Yeah. Visual image, acronym. These are what we're talking about. Let's dive a little deeper into the O. We talked about O being outline. What is outlining? It's combining all of the short phrases that you developed in your S step and combining them, like we talked about. So you know what came before and you know what comes after, and you know how they are linked together. Very, very important. And it's condensed so that when you take the end of your final exam, right, we've just did midterms, even midterms, you don't want to take a look at a half a textbook worth of information. How are you going to process that? But if you have an outline for every chapter, now you have a short 1 page for every single chapter. You might only have 8 pages to look at, 1 for each week. So by midterm, you got 8 pages to look at. Now, do you remember all the details? Maybe not. Do you have to go back and recheck? What was that thing about chapter 1 where they talked about rave? I don't remember what that stands for. Yes, you got to go back to chapter 1 and re-look at that. But the times you do it are only little bit, because overall, your outline, you remember 70, 80% of it. You only got to research the 20% you forgot. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's a technique also, is to outline. The final one is do not forget this. Review regularly. That means you got to review it. You got to try to recall it. Recall, I think of, again, we talk about visual image. Think of somebody being blindfolded, okay? Think of yourself, do that motion right now. Do the blindfold right here, right now. Do that with me. 1, 2, 3, let's go. Let's do that. Blindfold. Okay, if you do that physical action, you're going to remember that recall is about the blindfold. Why do we do such a weird, foolish motion? Because it is a, guess what? Mnemonic device. If you did that, you helped yourself remember that this is all about blindfolding. This is about recalling without looking. So what is recall? Recall is to close your eyes and remember. So, great time to practice. What acronym is like LOL, what acronym should you have already remembered up to this point? Whatever we are, 5 minutes into it. What should you remember? You got it, right? SMOR. Now let's back up. Let's not get too excited. You remembered that because me as a teacher, I helped you know that. I helped you because I gave it to you already, SMOR. Most professors, you think they're going to do that for you? Heck no, right? You know by experience, your professors do not go out and go, let me think of a cool acronym so these students will understand me better. No, they're going to do what they're going to do, and you got to figure out what acronym works to remember the stuff that you think is important. So this SMOR thing I've done for you, in future it's not going to be as easy. But the principle is the same. Think of a way to connect the dots using a word, using an acronym that makes it all come together. Okay? Anybody heard of Roy G. Biv? Pretty cool guy, right? What's he all about? The rainbow. Why the rainbow? What does Roy G. Biv stand for? Different colors. Now, which colors? We won't test you that. But you get my drift. Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Those are the colors of the rainbow. If you knew about Roy G. Biv, you would know about all the colors of the rainbow. If anybody asks you a question about that, you get 100% right. Anybody else heard of Roy G. Biv? See, now that's an example of an acronym, which is a memory device which helps you remember key information. But that person made that up. Is Roy G. Biv really a person? No, this is just a made-up thing, right? Is s'more a real thing? Not really. A s'more, S-M-O-R-E, is a real thing, but a s'more that I just made up is not a real thing. I made it up because it sounds like a yummy s'more. Make sense? So you got to come up, you got to be creative. You got to think on your feet. You got to figure out how the first letter of something can line up to make a good acronym for you to remember. Number 2, what does each letter stand for? This is harder. This means you have recalled. You're blindfolded. I'm not showing you the slide. You got to remember, what is it? So what does that stand for? Summarize. Very good. So you're getting that recall. You're closing your eyes and you're trying to remember, just like you would in class, may I say, right? How about number 2? How about the M? Mnemonic or memory. Okay, they both start with M. So it's a memory device. What's the O? What's the O stand for? Anybody? Outline, correct. Now, if you have to look at your sheet, that's okay. But if you can cover it up in practice, that's what I'm talking about. I'm teaching you how to do it through this class by actually going through this class. That's what you want to do in class. Professor says something, you're writing it down, they take a pause, they need to change their slide set, or they need to go refer to something in the textbook. You do that. You close your book up, you go, okay, now what was that s'more thing he talked about? The S is something. No, I don't remember. Let me see. Oh, it's summarize. Okay. S is summarize. You see what I'm doing? I'm recalling it and I'm practicing. Basically, I'm quizzing myself, right? I'm quizzing myself without having to actually do it. That's what you want to be doing. You want to be quizzing yourself as you go. So the next thing we're going to talk about is this one right here. Oh, sorry. The R, of course, is? R stands for? Review, correct. So the next thing we're going to do is, what is the visual image connected to this concept? Do you remember it? What is it? What's the image I gave you? Yes, like a campfire s'more. Everybody know what that is, right? Okay, so that's how you do it. You have all these memory devices to help you remember. So this whole s'more with the visual image and the acronym, that's how you need to be doing all of your studies, using mnemonic devices. Is everybody good? We clear? Okay, let's move on. We're going to go into a deep dive of each of these. What does it mean to summarize? You want to interact with the text, you need to do active reading. Like I said, you cannot be sleepy, you cannot be distracted, you cannot have the TV on or talk to your roommate and be doing it. You got to be focused in your studies. To do that requires that active reading piece, because you don't want to read something over and over and over. You should be reading it once, excited about it, and then putting in that summary. Okay? That's how you move forward and progress. You are summarizing paragraphs. We talked about that. We talked about 5 to 10 words. And then we talked about how, well, now I'm adding the fact that you may want to put in a graph or a chart if it makes sense. Don't be afraid to let a chart do some of that work for you, right? Anybody seen X and Y graphs and those kinds of things? They help you because they are a system for understanding something. So don't be afraid to use that in your note-taking. Now, I don't want to be all hypothetical. I want to get down to the real stuff, the practical stuff. So is anybody in sociology, psychology, any of those majors? Anybody? Okay, what's your name? Sorry? Talia. So Talia, you might want to pay particular attention on this, because this is an example that comes from the sociology world. This is from a real textbook, all right? Real textbook from sociology class. It's social policy class. And here it's an overview of political or policy analysis. So what I'm showing you here is simply a way that you might want to take notes in your textbook. You're writing 5 to 10 words per key idea. Now, how do you get it all together? Well, one way could be like just do sticky notes, right? You slap a sticky note and you put down the 5 to 10 words. Now you can see it a little clearer because I've typed it up for you. But I'm just kind of showing you an example. Probably the more likely one is not sticky notes. More likely you're on your laptop typing up the 5 to 10 words, right? So you're like chapter 3, big letter 1, value critical approach, and then little 1, you're going to say value analytic, value committed, value critical. The third one is the best. And then item number 2. It's not good enough just to describe. Do you see what I'm saying? But you have to do the work first with the actual text itself. You have to summarize 5 to 10 words, which requires that you understand what you read. That's a different hurdle. This class is not about that, but that is difficult. I admit that's hard to do. But that's why you stay active. That's why you're in your peak condition, right? You're at the best time of day that you can study the best. You're not doing it at 1 in the morning after you've had a long day, after you've been partying, whatever. These are bad times to study. Get yourself at a good time to study. So that's how that would look. Gave you an example. Now we'll do mnemonic, talk about the details, give you an example. The details are, you're using acronyms, like we've talked about, SMOR. I gave you an example. You're using memory devices, such as sounds like. It sounds like the s'more that you eat. And what is the image? The image is of a s'more, chocolate, marshmallow, yummy, delicious thing. So that's what we're going to do, is have an image that also matches up with it. Make sense? The other thing is you can do a song or a rhyme. You can do an action. So what might be an action we could associate with the s'more idea? Anybody have a thought about that? Now, when it comes to actions, I'll just tell you, the sillier, the crazier, the dumber, the better. Because what do you remember on YouTube? Do you remember the normal, the typical, the boring? Do you remember the football game where it was 17-14? No, nobody cares. People care about the Dolphins who scored, 55 points, right? That's the outlier, the weird, the strange, the amazing. In the same way, when you come up with an action, you want the weird, the strange, the amazing. So like for s'more, I might do something, again, weird because that's good. I might go, okay, by doing that weird action, okay, it helps me to remember. It's all about remembering. Don't worry, you're alone in your dorm room. You can do that. So you do that weird action, and that reminds you, every time you look at the word SMOR, you do that weird stuff, and you're like, okay, that makes me giggle, or that's really foolish. But you remember the s'more concept. That's all you're trying to do is remember, right? You brought up yourself. The key thing I'm having trouble with is I'm just jotting stuff down. I don't know how to package it. This is the way to package it. It requires some creativity. All right. So that's the mnemonic. Let's give you an example. Anybody studying business or economics? Business, econ? All right, so we got one person at least. So for you, have you ever heard of SWOT? The SWOT analysis. Okay, that's coming up. You have heard of it. All right. So SWOT analysis is very common in the business world. It stands for something. It stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a very common thing they use in business. I bring this up because I want you to understand that this is what people do. This is a thing. It's not so weird that you shouldn't do it or it's this bizarre thing. No, this is very, very common. People use acronyms all the time. Roy G. Biv, SWOT analysis, to help people understand key concepts. Now it's your turn to be creative and come up with your own acronyms to help you study. So SWOT is, like I said, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. It's one of the key principles in business to help you understand where your business is at and how to get your business to be stronger. Is it oversimplified? Yes. All acronyms are oversimplified, but they are a way to learn and remember. So there's an example of mnemonic device. Now we'll talk about outline, and I will give you a real example of outlines. So outlines, some of the key things are just summarize. You're just summarizing the information. So you might have a detailed textbook in this case, where you have to take a lot of notes, right? You want to get it into outline form. And sometimes that just looks like this. It's the whole Roman numeral, little I, 2 I's, 3 I's. Have everybody seen this? Like your word processor probably has this as a default template. It's there for a reason, because it's a good way to organize. So you have a main idea, you have subtopics, you have details, and all of that. That's how an outline can look. Has anybody used this before? Anybody do this? Does anybody feel like they could do a better job of it or need a different method? Okay, so this can help you, definitely. Let me give you an example in real life. This would be like English literature. Is anybody an English major? Anybody in English, writing, anything like that? Okay, so this might come from that world. In this case, you're studying Shakespeare for the day. So the professor's talking about Shakespeare, they're talking about when he was born and how he grew up and all of his plays. He had tragedies and comedies. Has anybody studied Shakespeare at all? Anybody done a Shakespeare play in high school or college? A couple of y'all? All right. So you understand where I'm getting at, right? So there's all these different things about him that you should know. He's done 39, plays, that sort of thing. Great. That's how you would do it in outline form. Make sense? Now I'm going to show you a little bit more complex way, but a very strong way to take notes that maybe you've heard of, maybe you've not. Has anybody heard of the Cornell method? Okay, 2 people, 3, maybe a few more head nods. Now you've heard of it. How do you actually do it? Anybody actually do it on a regular basis? So some of you have heard of it, but you don't really do it. I would encourage you to try it. It's really not that hard. It's just like taking notes like you usually do, but 2 little extra steps, just 2 little baby steps that you got to do in addition to. That's what I'm going to address right now. Here's what it looks like. First, you're going to have, let's pretend you have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, right? First, you're going to have 6 inches of that on the right for your main notes. You're going to leave 2.5 inches on the left for the cues. Now, do you have to make it 2.5? Of course not. Like everything, it's a boundary, it's a guideline. You don't have to do it exactly like that. It's just giving you a general idea. So you have roughly 6 inches for your main notes, roughly 2.5 inches for your left sideline. Now what you're going to do? First, you're going to do notes just like you always do. Take notes during class, main points, bullets, diagrams, outlines, all that kind of stuff, just like you normally would do. Here are the 2 little pieces you have to do in addition. On the left sideline, you're just going to write down some cues. You're going to write them very soon after class. You might even sneak it in during class. What you're trying to do is anticipate what might be the questions. What are the main ideas? What are the key vocabulary words that are being addressed here, right? And that's what you can use to review and study, so that you're not going through 400 words or whatever, 200 words a page of your notes. Instead, you only have to cover about 40 or 50 words that are all of your cue words. Make sense? Finally, the other small little steps, really not that bad, is to just make a summary for that page of notes you did in class with the professor. All that looks like is, let me summarize in 1 sentence, 2 sentences, what today was all about. Well, what this page is all about. And that's right here. You just write it after class. So you're right after class, you spend 5 minutes, quickly write down a summary. What was this about? We studied, I don't know, the effect of sunlight on plants and photosynthesis. Boom, done. We studied Shakespeare's life and his plays. Do you see what I'm saying? So you know that for each day, each page, you know what it's about. And then if you need to know further, you've got the main key ideas. You know he was born in England. You know that he, founded the Globe Theater. Do you see what I'm saying? So let's get into an example, because I don't want to talk about hypotheticals. I want to talk about the real world. Here we go. Here's the real world. Boom. We start with the notes. You're taking notes about Shakespeare. We're going to use that example. So here are some of the notes. Over the course of the years, the theater witnessed events including the Gunpowder Plot of 1605, the bloody civil wars, the beheading of King Charles in 1649. It was a time of war and bloody actions and animal abuse. You could just imagine you're in English class, right? The professor's talking and talking and talking, and you're scribbling down your notes, right? You're jotting down whatever comes out of his mouth, right? The hard part is what to make of all that. He's talking, you're writing. He's like, You know, there was a lot of, there was a virus going around, and it was believed that being in large crowds of people would make you more likely to catch the virus. Does that sound familiar to us? It does. So does 1600 England have nothing to relate to us today, or does it have something to relate to us today? It can relate to us, right? We just went through a crisis where people were not allowed to get in groups, where things were discontinued because of a virus. So this should make you perk up and be excited. Oh, this relates to me now. So that's why the theater was ultimately made illegal. And it says that the theater closed in London in 1596. So he decided to move his Globe Theater down south. And you look at the bottom one, it says, the Globe was built like an an arena. So it did not have a roof. It allowed sunlight to come into the Globe Theater. So those are some of the details. Now, here's the critical part. We've been just jotting down whatever comes out of the professor's mouth. Now what do we do? Well, the Cornell method gives you the answer. Number one, what's that extra thing? What's the first thing you do? Do you remember? What's it called on the left-hand side? Cues, right. See, I'm already testing you. What do you remember, what we're talking about? So if you jotted it down or if you just remember, that's good. You're retaining information as the person talks. But if you can't, that's okay. Take notes. So cue is the next thing. Let's see that drop. So the cue drops down. And what you're doing is you're finding what are the key questions that are being answered. Or alternatively, what are the key ideas that are being talked about? Just single words. So it could be something like history. Or it could be, for that first one, it could be bloody, right? Bloody wars is kind of what that whole thing was about. In this case, it says, what is the historical setting? That's fine. You can also do it the way I talked about with a keyword like bloody history. Same thing with the bottom. They have said, how was the globe created? You are anticipating a future quiz or test question. Do you see that? Can't you just imagine your professor going on a test? All right, guys, we're having a quiz. It's Friday. We're doing our weekly quiz. I want you to answer, how and why was the globe created? Can't you imagine your professor saying that? That's why the cues are so powerful. They're telling you, you are predicting for yourself what you're probably going to be tested on. Very powerful. If you choose not to do that, that's fine. Then just come up with keywords like the globe. Then at least you know this paragraph is about to talk about the globe. And then you can review it if you need to. Very important. These cues do not replace your detailed notes. They do not replace them. They are simply a signifier to help you understand that you better recall all the details. So it's not, hey, forget all the details, just remember the globe. No. Totally the opposite. The words the globe are supposed to jog your memory to remember that he built it in an arena, that sunlight was flowing, that he had to build it to the south because there was a plague going on. Do you see what I'm saying? Those details you're supposed to remember. You're not supposed to forget them, right? But you're just supposed to, but it's so much information. How do you categorize it? That's where this helps. You have a word like globe to then point to and jog your memory so that you just have the memory joggers on the left-hand side. They're just hitting you so that you can remember. Oh yeah, I got to remember about the globe. What? Bang, 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 bang. Oops, I forgot that. Let me go back to the text. No problem. You just go back to the notes taken during class and you just review, what did I write? I wrote down that all theaters closed in London in 1596. He decided to move southward and make the globe. The globe was built like an arena. It didn't have a roof. It allowed sunlight to go in. Do you see that? Oops, I forgot. No big deal. Just go back to your notes. It's there. Do you see how the two connect? You cannot use one to the exclusion of the other. You must use them in tandem. Everybody good with that? Now what's the other final little step I'm asking you to do with the Cornell method? What's on the bottom here? We did the main notes. We did the cues. What's at the bottom? Yes, you guys remember, right? Good. Summary. So the summary, we're going to drop it right now. Boom. Summary is just a 1 or 2 sentence brief overview. In this case, I might say something like, Shakespeare wrote in a bloody time, the plague shut down London, thus the globe was established to the south, and it was built with no rooftop. That's it. I might even have fewer details than that, right? It's up to you, but whatever you think is the most important piece, just say the 2 or 3 things that are the most important, and that's it. Do you see how this can work for you? So now, even though you took 4 entire pages of notes, all you look at are 4 sentences to summarize the whole day's lecture, for example. And then you're like, oh, wait, I don't remember about the bloodiness. I don't remember. Well, I'm going to go back up to my cue. Where is it? Oh, it's up here. This is where we talk about bloodiness. Do I remember now? I still don't remember? No problem. Now I go to the notes. Boom, what happened? Oh, there was the gunpowder plot of 1605. There were bloody civil wars. The King Charles got beheaded. He got his head cut off. Okay, I'm going to remember that one. You see what I'm saying? So it's a pointer to indicate where to go to get what you need. That is the outline method. Whew, that's a lot. Okay, take a pause. Jump into reviewing. Just going to quick reminder on that. 3 aspects. First, make sure you understand every aspect of your outline. This is what I've already talked to you about. If you forget, just go back to the main text. That's true for a textbook where you're summarizing 5 to 10 words. If you don't remember what those 5 to 10 words means, if you're like, value critical, value analytic, I don't remember what this is, right? For the sociology example, then you just go back to that part of chapter 3 and you look at that paragraph and you reread it and you go, oh, that's what it meant. Hopefully you won't have to do that too much, all right? Or in the case of notes by a professor, you're simply looking at the cue, the left-hand side, and hopefully you remember. When you look at the globe, you remember all the stuff. But what if you don't? Hey, no big deal, no problem. Go back to the source material and you can see your detailed notes. Oh, okay, the globe was built to the south. Oh yeah, the globe was built because of the plague that shut down all the theaters in London. Oh yeah, the globe is this big arena with no roof so the sunlight comes down. See, I'm doing the physical stuff, right? This could be your globe example. Boom, right? If you do this, you're going to look really foolish. Hey, it could be a dance step. I mean, that's a dance step right there. But anyway, you see you can make up dance steps and have fun with it and still learn that the Globe Theater was built open with the sun coming down. Boom. You see what I'm saying? All those funny things. The silly dance number, the funny rhyme you make, the acronym you do that's really silly. Roy G. Biv. What the heck is Roy G. Biv? It's nothing. Somebody made that up. All that stuff helps you remember. Review mnemonics. Solidify them in your mind. If you can't remember SMORE, you're never going to get to summarize, mnemonic, outline, review, right? You'll never get there. So you have to make sure the core is there. The acronym is in your memory in order to get to the next level of detail. And then you will retain it over multiple views. Make sure you're doing it like we talked about. Every night, 5 minutes is better than every week, 30 minutes. Remember, finally, the outline and the original text must work in tandem. You're never just ignoring the original text. You're just making sure that your outline is good enough to where you can still remember the stuff within the main body text. Whew. All right, that's a lot. Let's do some application. I want you to think about and maybe jot down which of those SMORE strategies are you already doing? But more importantly, which ones do you need to do more of? Are you using the Cornell method? It sounds like almost nobody is. Therefore, should you try using the Cornell method? Do you think that could work for you? So let's talk about it. Do you think it could work for you? And which ones do you need to work more on? The S, the M, the O, or the R? Let's start with that. What do you think you could work more on? S, M, O, or R? Thoughts? There's no wrong answers. We're just sharing.
I think I could work more on S and
S and O?
M.
S and M? Okay, good. Yes, S for summarizing and M for mnemonic. The mnemonic is really hard. You have to be creative. You have to put in effort to make it happen. But it can be really powerful for you. So it's the hardest to do, but I think it leads to the greatest results. Who else would have a sharing thing? What one aspect are you struggling with? Do you not do enough of? What do you think? How about you? Anybody? What do you struggle with? Anyone else want to share? The S, the O, M, the O, the R? What do y'all think? What about you fellas? What do you think? What do you think you could do the most help with, use the most help with? What can you do more of? You think, oh, maybe outlining? Okay. Okay, good. So you see how this is all working? Yeah? You guys clear on this? Let's go to the next section, which is different strokes for different folks. I believe that there's a lot of material that you need to have, and so I know it's a lot, but just try to get as much as you can. Just like any lecture, get what makes sense to you and throw away the rest, right? So if you only get 2 or 3 ideas out of today, it's been a success. But I'm going to overload you. I'm going to give you more than you need in the hopes that you remember at least 2 to 3 things. And if you take good notes, you'll be able to go back to them and learn even more than the 2 or 3 things you remember. So that's why I'm going to flood you with more than you need. Here are 2 different ways to attack note-taking. One is for non-technical information. This is stuff like literature, history, political science, sociology. Do we have any majors that are those that I just listed? Anybody in those majors? Okay, so for those, you know probably that your reading material is going to be very substantial. It's very heavy on reading. You're going to have a lot of text-based work to do, a lot of reading passages, a lot of density of wording. So the connection is typically going to be through themes and principles. On the other hand, how many of y'all are in math, science, computer science, economics? Raise your hand if you're in one of those majors. Anybody in one of those majors? So I've got at least one. That is going to be more about problem solving. Have you noticed that it's about problem solving? A lot of times in class, they're going through a problem and figuring out how to solve it, right? A lot of times that's what's happening. So what you're going to see is this step-by-step systematic thing that goes on. And then I connect the ideas typically by way of processes. A process is a step-by-step procedure, okay? So each of these requires a different way to approach it. If you fall on remind me again, who falls on non-technical? Who's in a non-technical major? More of a literature, political science, versus who's in a technical major? I guess just yourself? Okay. So let's go through the non-technical piece. I would recommend a QEC method, which is a question, evidence, conclusion method. This is a way of thinking about note-taking. So when the professor's talking, you can be processing in this way. What key question is a professor asking or trying to answer? And then, what answer is he or she proposing? Or are there multiple answers that he or she is proposing? Then, most importantly, what is the evidence being given for that? Let's take a silly example. My example is silly. Who's the greatest basketball player? Shoot, maybe there's a sports management class out there that might actually ask you this. So, who's the greatest basketball player? And maybe the professor might argue, or maybe it's a group discussion, and the group decides that it's Michael Jordan. Now, you may not personally believe that. Regardless, there is an argument to be made, and there is evidence being presented, and you have to write down what that evidence is. Maybe it's the fact that he won 6 NBA championships, or he had 2 three-peats, or if he was the NBA MVP 5 times. Various different pieces of evidence. Now remember, for every evidence there is a, what do you think? Rebuttal, very good. Counter evidence, a rebuttal. So maybe it's he won 6 NBA championships, but Bill Russell won 11. Or maybe he was the scoring champion, 10 times or 15 times. Well, then you can say, well, LeBron James has the most points in NBA history. So why isn't LeBron James the greatest basketball player who ever lived? So again, there can be evidence for, and there can be evidence against. You should be taking notes about all of that. But that's how you categorize it as evidence for this particular question and answer, and evidence against this particular answer. That's how you're going to be able to organize your thoughts from a note-taking perspective. Now I'm moving to the technical side. For those of you looking at that, I would recommend the PSA technique. And again, I've done the work for you. I've given you the acronym, right? PSA is very memorable because PSA stands for something. Does anybody know what PSA normally stands for? Yes, a public service announcement, right? To make sure that you're aware of something health-related that's very important. But here, PSA stands for something different. It's the problem that you have. You have an answer at the bottom, but the key piece is the middle of the sandwich. It's the meat and cheese. of this, which is the S, stands for steps. So steps are the things you have to do to get to the answer. The things you have to do to get to the answer. The key thing that goes with that is the one word called annotate. What does annotate mean? Anybody know? The word note is in there. What do you think annotate means? Take notes while you're reading. What it means is as you're going through each of your steps, you need to be taking notes about why that step is why it is, or what it is. Why is that step there? What am I actually doing? It's like analyzing your step. You know I'm going to bring it to the real world, right? I'm going to keep it real. So let's keep it real. Let's do a problem that hopefully all of you would know how to do, especially if you're on the technical side. Here's a problem about basic math. Nothing advanced, nothing complicated. Basic math. Might even see it in college algebra if there are any freshmen out there. Maybe you did this in MAT 1311. The numbers of absences in Mrs. Klein's class for each of the first 3 months of the year were 16, 12, and 17 respectively. If the average, arithmetic mean, number of absences for the first 4 months of the year was 14, how many absences were there in the 4th month? Everybody understand the question, or at least kind of has heard it? What do you think this problem is about? What is this testing? Obviously, it's a math problem, but what aspect of math is it testing you on? Anybody know? What's the key concept? The key concept is average. We're trying to find the average. Okay, so that's a problem about solving averages. What's the first step? What do you always need to know to do any math problem? You need to know what? Typically, you need to know what? Yes, the numbers, but then what's the thing where you plug the numbers into a what? Equation or a formula. Exactly right. So yes, you want the numbers, but first you better know what the equation is. So you need to know what the equation for average is. Maybe I'm going back to high school. I don't know. Maybe it's going back to freshman year in college. I'm not sure what year you're in. But wherever you're going back to, you probably kind of remember, oh yeah, average is where you take all the things, you add the things together, and you divide by the number of things. Right? Everybody remember that? So if you get the average of these 4 months, you're going to take the A, the B, you're going to take the 16, the 12, the 17, and whatever that fourth number is, you're going to divide by the number of terms, to use the appropriate math name. That's 4 terms. So divide by 4, and that's going to give you the average. So that's what I've done here. I've plugged in all the pieces I know. Then, what are you going to do? Does anybody remember? For real? Does anybody know how to do this math problem? You're going to multiply both sides by 4. Very good. You multiply both sides by 4 because you're trying to get rid of that denominator. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. That way I show the 4 on the left and I show the 4 on the right. They're going to eliminate each other on the right. And that's going to leave me with this. Then what do you have to do? Subtract all the terms that don't include x. So I'm going to take both sides. I'm going to subtract 16, subtract 12, subtract 17. I'm basically isolating x by itself to get x to equal something, in this case 11. So that's the A, the answer. The answer is 11 absences. Now, the key to this is all about the annotate. What did I say annotate is? Taking notes about the steps you take. So where do you see here where I've taken notes? Anywhere? What do you think? What parts show where I've taken notes? You can see down the right sideline. These are my annotations. So it's important to know that 14 equals 16 plus 12 plus 17 plus x divided by 4. But it's more important that by looking at that, you also recognize that you only know 3 of the 4 variables. That's the annotate piece. Yes, it's important that you know 14 times 4, blah, 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 blah. But what's critical is you understand that you're multiplying both sides by 4. Yes, it's good to know blah, 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 blah. What's key is I'm subtracting out any terms that do not include x in it. Do you see how my annotation is giving me the answers to how I do it? It's the how, not the what. If you only spend your time studying the what, when the actual question comes, it's not going to be in the exact format, it's not going to have the same numbers, and you're going to say what during the test. But if you don't focus only on the what, but you focus on the how, through annotation, you will have the principles to guide you on any question that you come up with. Make sense? All right, so that's the power of annotation. That's PSA. Here's another example. Anybody taking a chemistry class or is in one right now? Chemistry? Okay, my man. So, chemistry class. This might be an example of a student's note-taking during class. Professor scribbling on the board. They're showing you the H, the O, the hydrogen, oxygen, and this moves over and it enters a carbon and all this stuff, and you're jotting down whatever the professor writes. Is this student doing a good job or a kind of a poor job? What do you think? Poor job. Why? Just based on what we just talked about in the last 2 minutes. Because why? Right. This individual, she is only copying down what the professor wrote, and that's it. It's like you were saying, I'm just jotting stuff down, I have no idea what to do with it. What you should be doing is what? Annotating. So what does annotating look like? It looks like this. So the individual now has jotted down what the professor did, but was listening carefully. And by listening carefully, she was able to also write down the logic behind it. So she's writing down that the oxygen is negatively charged and is attracted to carbon's nucleus. That's why that little arrow is happening. Next, the next arrow is they're sharing electrons with carbon. That breaks the bromine bond. See how Br is separating. So she is describing, annotating each step in the process. How about the last one? She doesn't just ignore it and just show Br as being off to the side. She explains why. Electronegativity says that if bromine's bond breaks, it will take the electrons. Do you see how this works in real life? Right? Just copying what the professor says is not good enough. You have to break it down and understand it. You have to categorize it, associate it with a key question or a key word. Then you have to summarize, just like we've talked about for the Cornell method. For mathematical type things, you have to make sure to annotate so you're understanding the steps. You're not just writing the steps down. Yes, you have to do that. But you're annotating the why behind each step. Make sense? Is this helpful? You guys getting something out of this? Okay. So now to apply it. Do you think the QEC method could help you or the PSA method could help you? And maybe more importantly, this is the one I'll focus on. Are you annotating enough? What do y'all think? Do you think you're annotating enough during class? What do you think? Are you annotating at all? Is anybody annotating? What do you think? Kind of? Do y'all see how you could annotate in classes maybe a little bit better than you have been by seeing what I did for the examples here? Anybody feel like, yeah, that makes sense. I could probably do that. Yeah? Okay, good. All right. Now, what if you get in trouble, you don't understand how to do something? What's your means of getting back on track? What's your number one means of getting back on track? You're taking notes, you're trying to annotate, but you still don't understand. What should you do? Anybody? I would recommend you talk to the professor. Okay, number one, ask the professor. But there are other resources out there. You're on Hill Hall, in Hill Hall. Has anybody seen a professional tutor or a peer tutor? Anybody done that yet? So that's down in the bottom floor of Hill Hall. They're available for you to contact, and they will work with you on many subjects, many areas. Probably the area that you're struggling in, they've got a tutor down there who can help you. You could also talk to a friend who's been there and done that. Maybe someone in the major, if you're already in your major, who can maybe guide you or help you along. Maybe they got an A in the class, and you're not getting an A in the class, and you might be able to get their help. And finally, you could form a study group. And that study group could help you by bringing you along if you feel like you don't quite understand certain concepts, they can help you. And finally, I want to make sure you understand that to get a peer tutor, it's really not that hard. Getting help is not that hard. You just got to make sure to get it when you need it. All you need to do is go to mywconline.com, and that's where you're going to link up. That's the very first page. Once you register your email using your WSSU email, you could just select one of the subject tutoring areas or any of the other ones like the Writing Center to get help right away. Very powerful, very helpful, very easy to do. There's no reason why you shouldn't get help if you feel like you need it. All right, I got maybe 3 more key slides and then we'll call it a day. The first one is you got to aim for higher order learning. This is like a higher level thinking approach to note taking. Yes, you want to remember things. Yes, you want to understand them. But after you've done that, to get to the next level, you have to be able to apply it. You're applying it to the real world. You're applying it to other classes. You have to be able to analyze, evaluate, and create off of it. These are the ways in which you're going to bring your note-taking to another level, bring your study skills to another level. Even this, if I were to ask you, all right, I want you to do higher order learning. How could we use mnemonics to come up with a cute phrase or acronym or ditty or song or something? What could we use? What's an acronym we could use to remember the 4 parts of higher order learning? What are the 4 parts? Analyze, evaluate, create, and apply. How could we come up with a mnemonic? Let's practice right now. How could you come up with a mnemonic to remember that? Anybody have any ideas?
Double A.
Double ACE? I love it. Double ACE, because there's AACE. Totally legit, right? You don't have to go by the order they gave you. You make your own order, because they're all the same. You just jumble them around. So ACE would be a great way to do it. And you might want to do some kind of weird gesture or symbol for that, right? So that's how you do it. ACE. I like that. So the one I came up with is very similar. It's ace the A. Like ace often means to get an A in something. So if you're going to ace the A, that's the same thing as getting an A twice. So if you ace the A, that's how you can remember, whenever I study, I aim to ace the A, right? And that's how you can then remember the analyze, the create, the evaluate, and the apply. So I just gave you a mini lesson on how you can use mnemonics, right? This is what you got to do, but you got to do it every day in class, focusing on a way to structure your content to be memorable, all right? That's just an example. So the actual content I want you to know, but also we've done a little game to see how you can use mnemonics to help you. The 5 Re's of note-taking. You want to record what happens in lecture. You want to reduce, just like I showed you with the cues and the summaries. You want to recite, as I've mentioned several times. Reciting is where you, what's that mean? Yes, blindfold. See how you remember what I'm talking about? All I'm doing is a gesture. That's why gestures are powerful. Do they seem stupid for an 18 to 22-year-old? Yeah, probably. But do it anyway. Nobody's looking. So you do that, you blindfold, and you try to figure out if you can remember. So in this case, you might hide all of the words that start with re, and then try to remember what the 5 are. So that's reciting, saying back the information without seeing your notes. The 4th is to reflect. This speaks to ace the A. Have you spent time just reflecting on the lesson? I know you feel like you have to remember stuff and you have to do all of your textbook reading, but it would be actually possibly more effective if you just reflected on the information, stopped and thought about it in a creative way. That might help you remember the information even better. So find gaps of time where you can do that, where you can reflect. And finally is the review piece. Reviewing is making sure you go back over. If you never review, or if you review too infrequently, you're not going to remember stuff. All right. So there's the application. Am I reciting enough? How can I use ACA? How often do I review, right? That's that thing that we talked about. Many of you probably are not reviewing enough. It would be a great opportunity to review your notes more frequently. Schedule it. Put it in your calendar. 10 p.m., I'm going to review 5 minutes of biology, 5 minutes of English before I go to bed, whatever the case may be. All right, finally, I'm just going to sum up what we did today. It's the 1, 2, 3 process. The one is we got one plan. The one plan is SMORE. That's it. That's the big thing. The plan is to summarize, to use mnemonics, to outline, right? To regularly review. The 2 is having 2 different strokes or approaches. Remember that your classes oftentimes fall in 2 categories, non-technical and technical. For the non-technical, the answer could be QEC. For the technical, the answer could be the PSA for you. Finally, so we have one plan, got 2 strokes, now we got 3 strategies. The 3 strategies I want you to try to remember are get help when you need it, use the ACE to think at a higher level about what you're trying to learn. Don't just focus on the weeds and what things mean and just understanding the basic memorization. Go above and beyond and understand, what does this mean about life? What does this mean about work? What does this mean about politics? Try to link them together, link it to the real world. And finally, the 5 REs. Record, reduce, recite, reflect, and review. So with that, hopefully I've given you more than you need to do well in note-taking. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. It's not the end. Keep working at it. Keep doing it. All right? So thank you for coming. I do have a quick request. Please spend 3 minutes to zap this with your QR code reader and just fill out the survey. And also, if you have not signed up yet, please make sure to sign into the sign-up sheet. But that's the end of our lesson. If you guys want to ask any questions, I'm here. So feel free to ask me now or in private. Thank you for your time, everybody.